Hi guys, Stu here with Main Street Mower, and we're doing another video owner's manual. Today is STIHL small frame chainsaws. And there's a grouping here. We have 6 that are all very similar. So whether or not you have a 170, a 171, a 180, a 180 Easy Start, a 181, or a 211, everything we're going to talk about here today applies to all of these saws with some slight differences that we'll go over. The premise of this whole series is all of our customers and really the nation at large can have a common experience when owning a product like this with a video series like this. When you're buying a STIHL product, your dealer is going to spend time with you. They're going to go over that product and they're going to tell you the basics and everything you need to know. And they're going to gas that saw up with you. And we put bar oil in it and we crank it up. And we show you the right way to crank it without flooding it, how to restart it when it's hot, how to adjust your chain, some of the safety features like the brake that are on this saw. I always love doing a walkthrough with somebody buying a new product because I want them to own it and use it properly and maintain it. And you know, in the case of a chainsaw, these are quite dangerous and I don't want anyone getting hurt. So we're gonna really touch on safety a lot here with chainsaws. So when you buy a saw like this, it comes out of the box and it comes with a few things. It comes with a manual. It comes with a tool like this. Of course, the bar and chain are included. It has a scabbard, and then also has a pair of safety glasses. But this is not all that you really need when you're buying a chainsaw. There are some other pieces that don't come with it that you need in addition. One is that you need bar oil, and it is sold in the quart or the gallon, but there is a separate tank on every chainsaw that is filled with just this oil, straight, unmixed, uncut. And this tank has a pump that is feeding oil onto this chain whenever the saw is operating in order to keep this chain cool and sliding metal on metal along this bar. So you need to buy this separately. And then also you have to mix your fuel. So this is a common way. This is a synthetic mix. This is a 6-pack. Each bottle here makes 1 gallon. It says it's printed on the bottom of the bottle. There's a little emblem of a fuel tank plus oil to remind you that mixed fuel goes in the back. And there's a picture of a cutting tooth with a drop of oil to remind you that's where the bar oil goes. So those are some items you need. You need either a mixing oil or this product from STIHL Moto Mix, which is pre-mixed fuel, has oil in it already. And then you need a bar oil, 1/4 gallon, homeowner, commercial. But this is also the most dangerous tool that STIHL carries if you don't know what you're doing and you're not properly protected. So we're going to go over safety gear here really quickly. A chainsaw is a dangerous tool, so it's very important to wear safety gear. This should sell with every chainsaw. Unfortunately, it doesn't. These are about $100, but this is a lot less expensive than having no leg.
He looked up at me, he said, "Hey, feel my legs." I said, "Bubba, they ain't there."
Chaps, STIHL says that 80% of injuries that happen with a chainsaw happen from the waist down. So just by owning a pair of chaps, you're eliminating 80% of injuries. Now, I don't have a very good pair of boots on, but a good pair of leather boots, steel toe boots, would be an awesome idea. These chaps are filled with a material called Avertic. You can take a full speed running chainsaw, lay it down on these chaps, and as it penetrates the canvas, it opens up a white cottony material that gets pulled into the sprocket and binds up the chainsaw instantly before the saw can pass through into your legs. Second to chaps, the next most important thing would be a helmet. With a helmet on, you have dust protection, so that projectiles don't hit you in the face. Things happen with a chainsaw where limbs snap up into the air and come back down to clonk you in the head. And this is going to protect your head. And then chainsaws are loud, so you also have hearing protection. Lastly, you want to have a good pair of gloves. Now we're ready to crank the saw. All right, now that your fluids are topped, there's still some things to know before it's time to crank this saw. One is a little more about your brake and how it operates. It is inertia activated. The primary concern is that if you hit something hard with the nose of a spinning chain, all that reactive force wants to go somewhere. It wants to go up towards your head. And STIHL invented the kickback brake. And the brake is a band that's around the sprocket that in the event of this kickback action, the inertia activates the band and pinches the sprocket and prevents the chain from spinning any longer. Well, this handguard here is also the manual engagement of that same brake. So when you push it forward, just like pressing the brake in your vehicle, the brake is on. If you tried to pull the trigger at this point to rev the engine up, the chain is not going to spin. Pull back on it and you'll release the brake and the chain will spin freely. See how the chain is moving? Whereas now it's locked and it won't move. It is recommended to crank this with the brake on. However, it will crank with it on or off. But when it cranks with it off, the chain is going to take off spinning as soon as it cranks. 2 is also your form. When you're operating a saw, in the event of this kickback happening, the saw, just based on the way the engine is spinning, wants to go up and to the right. So whether or not you're right or left-handed, STIHL chainsaws come set up to be operated on the right side of your body. And really you're kind of putting the saw on your hip, your right hip, and pivoting off of that point. You want to be able to read steel on this side of the bar because that means you're off in the safe zone. And you would picture this back quadrant as being the high danger zone of a chainsaw. So the brake is on, you're in good position. Now, STIHL says that you can crank a saw by holding it like this, or that you put it on the ground and you put your toe in the rear handle. Your controls are located here on what's called the master control lever. The first position is off. The next position has an I symbol, an ignition or an idle. And this lever will move freely between those two positions. The next position down is half throttle. It's commonly called half choke, but it is not choking the engine at all. Every carburetor has 2 butterflies, one that controls your engine speed and one at the front of the carburetor that blocks the air to choke the engine. This symbol here is showing you that it's the butterfly in the middle of the carburetor that controls the fuel flow, and your engine will not flood in this position. It will breathe. It will actually opposite. It'll dry out a flood in this position. And then the bottom position is choke. So both of these positions are used for cranking a saw cold. Once the saw is warm and you turn it off with your thumb, cranking it is just put it back into I and pull the rope. A very common error that we see here, a lot of times people lend their neighbor, their brother, or their chainsaw, and when it comes back to them, this arm is broken off. And the reason is it will not go down here, even though it feels like it will, unless you are pulling the trigger. So if you hold the trigger all the way down and you press it all the way down here, then you're in choke, your cold start position. In this position, it takes 2 pulls, sometimes 3. But in this position, you're going to hear the engine chug, is a good way of putting it. It's the sound that the fuel has made it to the cylinder and it wants to crank. Once you hear that noise, it needs to come off of choke because the next pull is too much fuel. And the next one after that, it's even more and it's beginning to flood. So in this position, 2 pulls, you hear it chug. Once it chugs, you lift up on the lever. The lever will stop in the half throttle position. It will not go up into I. It will stop there. Then the next pull, it's going to crank. But it's in half throttle. The engine's going to want to spin. Your brake is on. So then you'll squeeze your trigger somewhat quickly, and that will move the saw out of half throttle into idle. And then it doesn't matter that the brake is on because in idle, the saw is not trying to spin the chain. And then you have off, back to run, pull the rope. We're going to do it. Here we go. So I'm pulling the trigger, going to take it all the way down. It's in choke. I'm going to put it between my legs, hold it here nice and firmly. So that was the 4th pull because it's brand new, dry, cold. And it was quite subtle. Sometimes you miss it. That's why we say never pull it more than 3 times in the choke position. Then you lift it up into this half throttle, put it back, and when it cranks here, I'm gonna pretty quickly grab the trigger and squeeze it, and by squeezing it, it's gonna advance this lever into idle. So here we go. So when I squeezed the trigger, that moved it to idle, and now you notice the chain's not spinning. And that's because the brake is on. Proper form for releasing your brake is with your left hand. Proper form for engaging your brake is with your left hand, with your wrist, like that. Because if you go to hit it with your right hand, one day you miss and you hit your chain. And then that turns it off. And one piece we didn't go over when we crank this is kind of your safety check. You know, beyond all of your safety gear, you want to make sure that the saw is in operable form. You want to check the brake, make sure the brake is working. You want to make sure that your wraparound handle is integral, that it's not cracked somewhere here below, and when it cranks, it's going to come loose on you and go flying. This is commonly missed, but I mean, you want to make sure your bar nuts are properly tightened. See, I had a loose one there. This is called your chain catch. In the event that this chain becomes derailed, this is going to double the chain over and the chain's going to slap the bottom of the saw. If this weren't here, the chain would slap all the way back to here and it would catch me in the arm and claw my arm up. With this catch here, it's going to fold the chain in half. It's going to shorten the amount of throw and make it stop, hit the bottom of the saw. On some certain saws, commercial saws have a removable chain catch. The chain catch on these models is built into the cover. So if a chain derails many times, it's going to eat through this little catch here, and you're going to want to replace this whole cover in order to get your catch back. So that's a piece of your safety procedure, is make sure your brake is working, engage it, and then try to roll it on something. Make sure that all your screws are tight and your bar nuts tight. You don't want any of this coming off. And make sure your catch is in place there. Next thing we're going to do is go over replacing your chain and adjusting your chain. All right, one thing to notice about a chainsaw chain is that it has a direction to it. And if you put a chain on backwards, it's not going to cut at all. And you're going to know, I put it on backwards, so you're going to have to take it back off and put it back on straight. And while you own a chainsaw, you're going to have to sharpen this chain or replace it many times. So you're going to have to know how to do this or have a good dealer to do it for you. The way a chain cuts is by collectively peeling a small sliver of the tree at each cutter many times at a very rapid pace to make it fly through the wood. But each tooth works like a mini wood planer that's sliding along the tree, peeling up a sliver. And so I always like to grab a piece of paper and show somebody how it works, because knowing how it works helps you get it on the saw correctly. If this were the log, as the tooth comes in, this is the cutter. This right here is the cutting surface. And if you slide your finger carefully along the chain, you'll feel that's the sharp edge right there. And it's going to grab your finger. I hear some people call it cat claw sharp.
Why?
I don't know why.
You'll feel it grabbing the ridges of your fingerprint, and that's really how you can tell you got a sharp chain. Well, that cat claw tip sticks up a little more proud than this depth gauge. This is what's telling how big the sliver that's going to peel away is going to be. So as it comes into the wood, this is what you get. The wood slides under that tooth, and can you see that the tooth is on top? And then the wood is still connected to the tree at this point until, this is the left-hand cutter because it's on the left side of the chain, until the right-hand cutter comes in and hits it and completes the final piece of the cut. So when a chain is sharp, depending on the grain of the wood, but when everything's going correctly, that's the size of a chip that's coming out of the back of this saw. And as your chain becomes more and more dull, these pieces are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, that's what you're looking for. You don't want that because your saw is working a lot harder to push that chain. This saw already runs really hot. 400 degrees. It's an air-cooled engine, and it's working its butt off.
Oh, Jesus! I blew my butt off!
The number one killer of chainsaws is a dull chain and pushing them through the wood.
Here's Johnny!
You know, a good sharp chain, you lay it on the wood and it's just gonna walk its way right through. So keep an eye on your chips. Also let the saw do all the work. Never push it through the wood because you're heating it up. So we learned that just so we know which way to put this chain on. So these are called your bar nuts. Your saw came with this tool. You loosen your bar nuts here and you take your sprocket cover off. Save those to the side, you're gonna need them. And your adjuster is here in the middle. As your old chain wore, it kept expanding as it got older, so your adjuster pushed your bar out further and further. So now that you're putting a new chain on here, you're gonna wanna loosen it up. So now you see how the chain is dangling down? Now, the bar has a roller sprocket on the end, and it has 2 holes in it, and that is because this bar is reversible. So the adjuster sticks through that hole and nothing is sticking in this hole here. But the part of this bar that's gonna wear the most quickly is this bottom edge here. So if you wanted to extend the life of your bar a little bit, you can flip it over, and now you're using that other hole that was drilled, just allowing you to flip this over and get more wear. So it's best to have your saw sitting flat like this. You also want to have your brake off, because if your brake is on, the sprocket is stuck in place, and then the chain doesn't mesh on the sprocket quite as well. So release your brake, put your bar on the saw, sit on a flat surface. We have another video just dedicated to this if you want more info. Get it all in, on the rail. And then put your cover back on. And once your bar nuts are just finger tight, then you can adjust your chain here. And you see how the slack's coming out of it as we go. And really, as it makes contact here in the middle, and you can pull out about that much, that's proper tension, a little bit more. You see this tooth here, right as it kisses the bar, that's the end. And then tighten these back up. Every new chain has a wear-in period, and in the first 20 minutes of cutting with a new chain, you'll probably have to stop, turn the saw off, and adjust the tension to pull any of the dangling slack out of this chain. And then it'll pretty well be worn in and not need much adjusting from there. I also want to show you the easy chain adjustment models because it's a little different. We were looking at an MS180. We're gonna now look at an MS180C because you may have this model. So when you're adjusting your chain tension here, you lift up on this, you loosen this a turn and a half because it's pinching the bar and now it's not pinching the bar. You roll the knob this way, your chain becomes loose. You roll it this way, your chain tightens back up. So that's all you would have to do, toolless chain adjustment, no need for this. And then you would tighten this back up. Now, in the event you need to change your chain or change your bar, it's a little more involved because underneath this cover is this little gear here, and this is what's doing the toolless chain adjustment. So I'm just gonna twist it loose with my finger and then take this off of the sprocket studs, take the chain off. This thing is screwed on through that same hole that the bar adjuster goes through. When this is on the saw, that nut there that's holding this on is going back and forth in that little slide position. So when you get a new bar, this mechanism comes over to the new bar. That comes out, that comes off, new one back on. Snug that up, put it on. You see when you go this way, you see how much it moved out away from the sprocket when you come back in, and it's all done with this cover over the top. This is very hardy system. It looks like this would be something that breaks. It never breaks. Now when you go to put the chain back on, the best bet here is actually to take the bar off of the saw. So you don't have quite enough room otherwise. Kind of get it all in the track. Then put it on the sprocket first. Stretch this forward. Tighten it up by hand. Put this cover back on. And then sometimes you do all this just to realize, I wasn't paying attention to my chain direction. I got my chain on backwards. No big deal. Take it off, put it back on the right way. Now we have the proper tension. All other saws in the STIHL lineup have one of those two mechanisms for adjusting the chain, either the tool or the tool-less. This one is the same as the side access style with the tool, but you tension it here in the front, and that is on the MS170 model. It's actually the only saw in the STIHL lineup where you adjust your chain tension right here up front. And this is tight quarters, and it's common to bump your knuckle on the chain and have a bloody knuckle. So no reason to really go over it all in depth. Changing the bar and chain's the same. You're just gonna loosen the bar nuts here, and you have to come in here. It's a little more delicate, and your tool tends to slip off of the bolt. So there's a loose chain, and then you're gonna reach in here and righty-tighty makes the chain tight. It's just not the easiest place to fit. But just as reliable of a system, it's inexpensive, very hardy, should last the life of the saw without stripping or wearing out or anything like that. All right, we're gonna do a little look under the hood. On the right here are the older models, and you can see that they end in a 0, the 170, the 180, the 180C. And then here on the left, these all end in a 1. This is the newer models. The primary difference between the old and the new is, one, the anti-vibration system here is rubberized, and here it's a spring. And this anti-vibration system is a little more robust, so it's a little smoother in your hands. The bigger change from here to here is that this is an old school 2-stroke. This is a new school stratified cleaner burning 2-stroke. So this one's less smoky and more emission compliant. A lot of people say, man, I wish I could still get them like I used to. You can, or I want some of the creature comforts of the new models, and that would be over here on the ones ending in a 1. So when you go to take the hood off on these, you want to take your master control lever all the way down, and then you use your tool here to unlock. Oh, a little sticky. All right, you notice your hood, it has 2 hinge points right here, and on the front of the saw, kind of under here next to your muffler, are 2 hooks, and that's where the hood is pivoting from. And then you have your air filter here, your spark plug here. So if you were going to service this saw, you'd take your plug out, you'd replace your air filter, and then you would also change your fuel filter, which you may have seen it in our other videos, but it's down in the fuel tank. You reach in here with a hook, you pull the fuel line out, put a new filter on. On this model, no tool, you pull back on the latch. You do take your lever all the way down. Your hood comes off. You notice that this air filter is sealed a bit better. It has this little bracket here. Spark plug, all pretty much looks the same otherwise. Thank you for watching this episode of Video Owner's Manuals, where we go over the STIHL small frame chainsaws. It has been my pleasure to tour you through. I hope you're more safe and more informed. Please watch more of our videos. Please like and subscribe. Please comment down below of any things we did wrong, or new videos you want to see, or other products you want to see. And have a great day.
What up?